You know, most people really can't tell you much about the Evil Dead franchise other than it's an evil book and some idiot in the movie read the book and some demons came and they killed everybody. And if that's your analysis of the Evil Dead franchise, then you really wouldn't be wrong, because that's pretty much what happens in every single movie. And as a result, people have this tendency to reduce the Evil Dead franchise to just being brainless, demonic gore slop. But see, I've always thought that these movies had a deeper meaning than what you can see on the surface, because every single Evil Dead movie, in my opinion, tells a different story about survival. And no, I don't mean survival in the obvious sense, because I think it's pretty obvious that survival is the goal of a horror movie. But when I say survival, I mean it a little more metaphorically. I mean like surviving yourself, letting go of bad habits, adapting to your environment, discovering things about yourself that you didn't think was possible, overcoming your fears, and letting go of self-doubt. You know, and the more I really think about it, bro, the Evil Dead franchise is pretty woke. Now, before y'all get to typing and losing y'all damn mind in my comments, let me clarify something real quick. This ain't one of them videos, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you came here for that, then I'm sorry. Cause I don't mean woke in the way that it's been thrown around lately. Cause letting y'all know right now, y'all been using the word completely wrong. When I say woke, I'm talking about its original meaning. And no, I ain't finna clarify it either. If you know, you know. Cause see, when I look at the Evil Dead franchise through that lens, I see more than just the blood and the guts and the mindless violence. Because these movies depict real people dealing with real struggles. They just use horror to tell the story. For example, let's look at the first Evil Dead movie. Now, we all know that the Ash that we see later in the franchise, like Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness, all that ain't the Ash from the first movie. You feel me? Ash from Evil Dead 1 is basically a completely different character. You know what I'm saying? Now, in that movie, Ash is not the leader of the group. He's not even the main focus of the movie for at least the first half. The original Evil Dead movie really focused on Cheryl for the most part. And then after she got possessed, the story switched over to Scotty. He's the one that you really would have thought would have been a survivor. He's way more bold than Ash is. He's louder, he's more confident, always had some like slick macho man stuff to say. He stayed teasing Ash for being such a wuss in front of his girlfriend and his sister. And it's like people forget that. Like, that man Ash got teased a lot in the first movie. I guarantee you, bro, if somebody was to watch the first Evil Dead movie for the very first time and you ask them, who do you think is gonna survive? I guarantee you they wouldn't say Ash. He seemed way too quiet, way too timid, and just not built for survival, bro. Like, he did not seem like the kind of person that could deal with the things that they were about to face. But see, that's kind of the whole point, because somebody being courageous in a movie doesn't really hit the same if that person was already confident and sure of themselves from the beginning. Like, look at most superhero movies, especially looking at a character like Spider-Man, for example. Peter Parker's story carries a lot more weight because of the struggles that he had to go through to become Spider-Man. And the Evil Dead doesn't introduce Ash as some strong, confident hero type character. He came on screen as just a regular ass dude. They depicted Ash as just a scary ass dude in the cabin, and honestly, that's the most accurate depiction of what somebody would really be like in that situation. But when danger pops up and it becomes life or death, all that being scared stuff, bro, you gotta throw it out the window sometimes. And in Ash's case, he lost every single person that he came to that cabin with. And if we're being perfectly honest, he lost everybody twice, because first they got possessed and then he had to watch them all die one by one. His homegirl Shelly got possessed, his homeboy Scotty got possessed, his girlfriend Linda, she got possessed, Cheryl, she got possessed. He had to watch Scotty dismember somebody that he loved and cared about. He had to chop his own girlfriend's head off, bruh. Do you understand how far you have to be pushed in order to make that decision? Like, I need you to really think about this. Imagine being forced to kill the person you love because that's the only way you can survive. Is that a decision that you could truly make in real life? And then he throws the book in the fire and everybody that's left melts and burns in front of him. He watches their flesh melt off of their bones, losing all of his loved ones spiritually and physically, pretty much all at the same damn time. No matter what that man was going through in this movie, bro, he kept going. Even when he was scared out of his mind, he kept fighting and he kept on trying to survive. He was clearly outnumbered. He could have just let them take him. Or let's be honest, he could have took himself out. But he chose to stay and fight. And he chose to live even if it meant having nobody else with him. And that honestly is why I think Ash Williams is one of the best horror movie characters of all time, bro. What this movie is showing you is that just because you're courageous don't mean that you're not scared. It also showing you that just because you're scared, that don't mean that you're not courageous. Two things can be true. And the truth is, most of us are not fearless. If we were in that same situation, most most of us would have reacted just like Ash. A lot of us deal with self-doubt. We deal with a lack of confidence. We live in a society where we constantly feel like we're not good enough. Sometimes having to watch other people be better than we are, feeling embarrassed because we can't be what people need us to be. Ash pretty much spent the entire movie feeling just like that. But when everybody else was gone and when nobody else there to save him, who did he turn to? He turned to himself. Ash did not survive because he was the strongest, the smartest, or because he was the most fearless. He survived because he refused to quit. And to me, with my overly metaphorical ass brain, that's the message of the original Evil Dead movie. Sometimes life is just gonna put you in situations that you never asked to be in. And these situations might make you question whether or not you're strong enough to survive. But just like Ash, you may not always realize how strong you are until life gives you no other choice but to be strong. Basically, what I'm saying is the first Evil Dead movie asks a very simple but very profound question. What do you do when there's no one around to save you? And do you have what it takes to overcome any obstacle thrown your way? Now, to me, that sounds like a lesson that everybody can see some value in. Now, you may not be able to see that same, deep layered message when it comes to a movie like Evil Dead 2, mainly because of how over the top, silly, and goofy that movie was. But to be perfectly honest, bro, I would not count the Evil Dead 2 out just yet. Now, in the second Evil Dead movie, Ash was a completely different character. Way more masculine, way more confident, and while he was still clearly scared out of his mind, he handled himself a lot better when things started to go crazy. He spends majority of this movie by himself, unlike the first Evil Dead where most of the movie involved him and his friends, whether they were possessed or not. This movie basically starts off with just Ash and his girlfriend, and then for the rest of the movie it's mostly just him. And everything in this movie was totally turned up to a whole nother level. His girlfriend's possessed, the woods are possessed, the damn cabin is possessed, his hand becomes possessed. The man can't catch a break worth a damn in this movie. And over the course of the movie, bro, you see this man literally lose his freaking mind. He starts laughing all hysterical and dancing around with the furniture. It seems like he's starting to crack under everything that's going on. You could even argue that the reason why things in Evil Dead 2 looked way more wacky than it did in the first one is because he was really starting to crack under that mental pressure, and he was actually going, insane for real. Damn near schizophrenic, hallucinating type of crazy. As things start to progress, it gets to a point where Ash locks in completely, and after that his whole energy changed. He wasn't bouncing off the walls laughing and giggling and screaming at the top of his lungs no more. At this point he had started dropping one-liners and he was being all like an action hero, you know what I'm saying? So if I had to take a lesson from Evil Dead 2, to me it's a story about maintaining your sanity when the world starts crumbling around you. When it seems like everywhere you go something more and more absurd is going on. How well can you keep yourself intact? The first movie asked us, do we have what it takes to survive? In the second movie, we already know that we have what it takes to survive. But we all know surviving is just the first step. Survival has to be maintained. And that's what the second movie is asking us. Do you have what it takes to stay mentally strong so you can keep pushing through all the madness? Army of Darkness also has a pretty deep theme. Telling you, y'all gotta lock in with me, man. I don't just be yapping for no reason. What lesson could Army of Darkness could be teaching you? What if I told you that the meaning of Army of Darkness is responsibility? Because that's the one thing that Ash spent majority of this movie trying to avoid. For most of Army of Darkness, bro, Ash is trying to leave. That's all he's trying to do. He ain't trying to help. He ain't trying to stick around. He ain't trying to find out nothing. He just wants to bounce. Understandably though, I'm not blaming him for that, because after everything that he just went through, I wouldn't want to be in 1300 AD either. But not only did he spend majority of the movie trying to leave, he was also lying. He stayed trying to cut corners, purposely saying the wrong words. He's selfishly only thinking about himself, despite clearly seeing these people of this time period going through something really serious. Despite all of that, by the end of the movie, what does he do? He chooses to stay and fight for the people that he don't even know. He ends up becoming the hero that everybody already thought he was. This movie is basically Ash growing into being a leader. We already know he can survive, but can you lead? That is a very important trait to have. Ash versus Evil Dead, another one that you may not think has anything important to say, but it does. It was basically about him growing older but not growing up. He spent 30 years avoiding his trauma, running from his responsibilities. Like, this man was living in a trailer on purpose, and they trying to be funny and using humor as a way to cover up how he felt, because that is his only method of survival. But no matter how much he tries to bury his past ends up catching up to him, and his past caught up to him because he woke it up. The entirety of Ash vs. Evil Dead is him finally confronting decades of unresolved guilt while also learning how to care about other people again, because we hadn't seen Ash form any real bonds with people since he lost his friends in the first cabin. So if we look at Ash as a character, his entire saga starts off with a story about learning how to be courageous and have self-confidence, then goes into a story about tenacity and staying mentally strong, then it teaches a lesson about responsibility and leadership, then it ends with facing your past and healing from all of your traumas. But these messages don't just stop there, because we got Evil Dead 2013, Evil Dead Rise, and Evil Dead Burn. Evil Dead 2013, bro, asks a very blunt and straightforward question. Can you kill the version of yourself that's destroying your life? And low-key, I think 2013 is the most metaphorical of all the Evil Dead movies. You got Mia, she's a drug addict, she's trying to get sober, she has somewhat of a support system, but if we're being honest, the people who are supposed to be supporting her are really her biggest doubters. Because if you remember in that movie, her friends had no confidence that she was actually gonna kick her habit this time. They talked about how she tried this before, how she even was legally dead for a little while and had to be resurrected, and when the demon started tampering with her and she was starting to suffer from it, when she was telling them what was going on, they didn't take her serious. They thought she was just trying to leave so she could go back home and dabble in drugs again, when in actuality this girl was going through one of the worst forms of demonic possession we've ever seen in a horror movie. But if you put on your tinfoil hat, you might get curious and ask, is this movie really just about possession, or is it about something else? Because what we see in this movie is Mia trying to escape, but she can't. She gets cornered by the demon and she gets taken over. Now, one thing that I find very interesting about the demon from Evil Dead 2013 is that it was a doppelganger of Mia. It looked just like her, and in a way you could see that demonic version of Mia as what people saw in her while she was under the influence of those drugs. And when the demon entered her body, that's what it's like from the eyes of an addict. You acting out, you saying crazy stuff, you doing a bunch of crazy things that you know you wouldn't do in your right mind. Mia is watching herself do these things from the inside and she has no control over it. Shooting at her brother, throwing up in the girl's mouth, talking crazy, saying off the wall shit. And just like Ash, Mia was the least likely person in this movie to survive. And like I've said plenty of times before, bro, I think Mia is the greatest final girl of all time, because never have I ever seen a movie where a character was the victim, became the villain, and then became the hero in the same movie. And one by one, as her friends and her brother started to lose their lives, Mia was left alone. She had no one else to run to, she had nowhere else to run to, and at the end of the day, the only thing that she could do to survive was face essentially herself, because again, this demon was a doppelganger. And in order for Mia to overcome this situation, she had to die. David buried her alive so the demon could exit her body. So she died and was reborn, like literally. We witnessed the rebirth of Mia, clean, confident, and no longer controlled by this demon or by those drugs. She had to kill the version of herself that was ruining her life. I ain't done yet though, because Evil Dead Rise also has some pretty deep stuff going on. Evil Dead Rise was about motherhood, clearly, in more ways than one. Ellie, who was a single mom of 3 kids, and Beth, who was currently pregnant in the movie. And with the theme of Evil Dead Rise being motherhood, to me the question that it asks is, what happens when the expectations of motherhood turns you into a monster? Because Ellie isn't portrayed as a bad mom before she gets possessed. Overall, she seems like a good, caring, and loving mother, but she's exhausted. Financially, she's stressed. She's living in this raggedy apartment that's gonna be torn down. They talked about that in the movie. On top of that, she's recently separated, and it doesn't really seem like she's getting a lot of help from her children's father. And she's doing all of this by herself, trying to raise 3 kids. Now, even though we all know that being a parent, especially a mother, is a very hard job, we oftentimes don't give parents the grace to be human. And that's something that I didn't really understand myself until I became a parent. Because as much as you may love your kids, bro, sometimes you just don't want to do this shit. You just kind of want to worry about yourself and do your own thing. You don't want to always have to be responsible for somebody else, especially when you got your own mental struggles going on. You got your own problems, but you got to put them to the side because you got to be a parent and tend to their needs. Sometimes it can be real daunting, but unfortunately it's taboo as a parent to say, I don't want to do this right now. You have to keep going and going and going, no matter how tired, beat down, fed up, and exhausted you are. And that's what Ellie was dealing with in the movie. And in the movie, when she becomes possessed by the Deadite, it basically just twists all of her fears and all of her guilt into something overly horrific. The Deadite allowed Ellie to speak out and act out her worst fears, and those fears were of her being a bad mom. She never wanted to harm her kids. She always wanted to protect them. But deep down, she was exhausted. Demons saw that and basically made that all of Mommy Deadites' personality. I hate these kids, kill them, get rid of them. Bro, she literally called those kids titty-sucking parasites. That's how fed up she was. But on the flip side of Ellie's motherhood, you also got Beth. Beth was a character who clearly nobody expected to be a mom. Her sister kept calling her a groupie, meaning she obviously must have slept around with a lot of people. She wasn't in a relationship and really seemed to only care about herself because she was single and she really didn't have anybody else to care about. But it was revealed in the movie that Beth was currently pregnant during all of these events. So you got one character who's a woman who doesn't really want to be a mom, who's about to become a mom, and you have another character who's a woman that is currently a mom but really don't want to be one right now. And throughout the movie, we see Beth learning what it is to be a mom. She has to protect her niece and nephews, and then when the other two die and all she has left is the little one, she really has to put her life second to make sure that her niece survives. And she also has to make sure that she herself survives because her baby has to live. So in a way, Evil Dead Rise kind of mirrors the message of Army of Darkness because they both tell a story about leadership and learning what it's like to care for other people. Then you got the newcomer to the bunch, Evil Dead Rise, which clearly was about abuse, bro. That was the whole theme of this movie. It was about abuse, spousal abuse, family abuse, everybody getting abused. But with the story of Evil Dead Burn, it asks the question of, can abuse survive once somebody finally decides that they're no longer going to enable it? And in that sense, the title Burn becomes symbolic because it doesn't just mean literally burning everything down. It's burning down those cycles of abuse and the enabling of it, burning down being silent, not saying nothing and letting it just slide, and it's burning down and getting rid of all that generational trauma that clearly was present in this family. Alice was abused by Will. We saw that blatantly in the movie. And when Will died, we also see that Alice didn't really have much remorse for his death. She didn't really seem to be mourning like that. In a way, she was probably relieved. But through Will's death, we got introduced to his family, and we clearly see that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree because Edgar also is an abusive man. I think that was pretty plain to see. But see, Alice wasn't the only person in the movie that was being abused because look at Joseph. Everybody has been trying to compare Joseph to Bear from Obsession lately and throwing him in this category of weak men of horror in 2026. First of all, we saw multiple examples of Edgar treating Joseph like shit. This man Edgar was more concerned with why Alice wasn't sad that Will died than he was over the fact that his son lost his brother. Joseph even tried to sit next to his dad at the dinner table, but he stopped him and said, no, that's Will's seat. And Susan, yeah, she was abused too, but Susan is also an enabler. She sees all of this going on, and at one time does she correct Edgar on his behavior towards Joseph because her whole life and identity was being a wife and being a mom. She lost all sense of self, and in a way, you can see in the movie that she resented Alice because Alice didn't fall into that. When Alice told her that she didn't really want to do the restaurant anymore because that was Will's dream, Susan told Alice, no, you have to do it. It's his life's work. Alice don't give a damn. That man is gone. She's free now. But Alice being so wife and mother trained that she can't see a life past that. So clearly abuse and trauma is something that runs deep in this family. And unfortunately, this family protects it. And when Alice got tired, she got faced with this danger, she stood up and she destroyed this bloodline that would have continued this same toxic behavior. And at the end of the movie, she was finally able to set herself free when she stabbed Deadite Will's skeleton burning man with that short ass Kandarian dagger. Evil Dead Burn was about standing up to bullies, standing up to people who make your life a living hell, standing up to your abusers, taking back your life, and no longer being controlled by people who are hell-bent on repeating the same toxic cycles. And listen, all I'm saying is people have always dismissed the Evil Dead franchise as nothing but just blood and chainsaws and demons and dumbass characters reading from books they ain't got no business reading from. And don't get me wrong, that stuff is absolutely a part of the appeal. It is majority of the reason why we come back to this franchise in the first place. But underneath all of that violence and silliness at times, there's a story that is very human underneath all of that. And every Evil Dead movie tells a very important story. Sometimes that story is finding courage when you're terrified. Sometimes it's overcoming addiction. Sometimes it's motherhood. Sometimes it's escaping abuse and just facing your demons. The way I see it, the Evil Dead movies aren't just about fighting demons that come from a book. These movies are about fighting demons that come from within or come from things that you associate yourself with. It's about fighting those parts of yourself that threaten to consume you. Even though at the end of the day, the Evil Dead movies will always be seen as just over the top violent gore slop. But for me, they mean a little something different. And that is honestly why the Evil Dead franchise is my favorite franchise of all time. Because while it may be just slop to you, to me, it's slop with substance. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and the subscribe button and drop a comment below. Maybe a small thing for you, but for me and this channel, that's huge. Appreciate y'all for rocking with me, and y'all stay tuned for the next one.